This artist is named Yamamoto Baiitsu. He was born in 1783 and lived until 1856, so he was roughly contemporaneous with Hokusai. Now, as I was studying about Hokusai and his daughter Katsushika Oi for the video that I did on Oi, I started asking myself, well, what types of Japanese art were going on concurrently with the ukiyo-e style that weren't ukiyo-e? And so Yamamoto Baiitsu is an example of an artist, a Japanese painter, who is not really working in the ukiyo-e genre or style, and so he represents sort of the more traditional types of Japanese paintings that would have been going on before and during the ukiyo-e phenomenon. The painting that we're looking at right now is called Egrets in a Lotus Pond, and it was made around 1852. I'll read you what it says in the Metropolitan Art Museum website where I found this image. A flock of egrets has descended upon a pond where lotus plants are bursting into bloom. Yamamoto Baiitsu, one of the most prolific and highly esteemed nanga or literati painters, was renowned for his bird and flower paintings and ink landscapes. The composition departs from his standard output by taking the two primary pictorial motifs, egrets and lotuses, and repeating them in profusion. The effective use of perspective adds a naturalistic flavor to the description not often found in the artist's works. Baiitsu also mastered the boneless mokotsu painting technique, in which outlines are discarded and pigments naturally pool to form edges of forms, as seen in the rendering of the lotus leaves. So what is a literati painter? To answer that, you need to know a little bit about the Chinese painting traditions that influenced Japanese painting. Like many cultures around the world, traditional Chinese culture tended to view painters as a sort of more of a craftsperson, a craftsman or an artisan, rather than like an artist in the way that we tended to see them in the West after the Renaissance, with the exception of the literati painters. So a literati painter was not a craftsman, not an artisan. A literati painter was a refined sort of gentleman, someone who was educated and probably more like a poet who just sort of happened to make little flourishes and embellishes on the side of the poetry that kind of evolve into an art form in its own right. So basically, think of the literati painters as intellectuals, and in that sense they are more like the artist as conceived in the West after the Renaissance. The artist is a sort of an intellectual who makes pictures that reflect sort of a more depth and more like almost philosophical concepts. So when they say that Yamamoto Baiitsu was a literati painter, that's what they're talking about. He was the Japanese equivalent of what that literati painter was in China. Notice here that same boneless method where he's not relying on outlines, but just letting the edges of the color create the form. This isn't that common for depictions of branches and trees and such. Those usually did have more of an outline. Okay, I'm going to show you two more artworks by Baiitsu that are currently housed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This one is a long scroll called Insects and Grasses that is dated to 1847. And the scroll is so long that I can't show you the whole thing at the same time. We'll have to look at it section by section. Now we've reached the crescendo of activity. This is sort of the largest mass of shapes massed together. And I really wish I could see the whole thing in one fell swoop, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, this would probably not be the center of the scroll. Typically, this sort of climactic moment in the composition is kind of to one side or the other in the sort of an asymmetrical composition. And you can start to see that here, how the negative space begins to emerge again as the positive space sort of thins out and the composition the balance between negative and positive shifts back towards the negative space. Until here, towards the end of the scroll, it's almost all negative space again. And if you recall the other side of the scroll, there was, where we started, there was also more negative space. If you look, it's not as much negative space as we end up with here, which again is what you tend to see in artworks that have a horizontal orientation. Even though the positive to negative ratio is tapering off in both directions, you wouldn't want that ratio to be the same on either side. And here I've gone ahead and put together the two segments that would form what I believe is the center of the scroll. And you can see that that area I was referring to as the climactic moment of the composition is set to this side. So if I'm correct here, this would be, the exact center portion of the scroll. Except for two segments that I haven't shown you. On either side, there is this calligraphy, and then this, which includes the signature of Baiitsu. And it's written in a beautiful hand, which is what you would expect. Sadly, I don't know what is written in this section with the longer text. I imagine it would be a poem, or some sort of narration. Really not sure, and unfortunately the museum website doesn't specify what the text is about here. One interesting tidbit of information that the museum website does give is the fact that Baiitsu has painted more than 50 types of insects here, and that many of them were lifted directly from the manual of the Mustard Seed Garden, a famous Chinese text that basically functions as a how-to manual and introduces beginners to a wide variety of forms from the natural world and sort of shows a step-by-step approach of painting them. So it's kind of interesting that Baiitsu is just copying a lot of these forms that I imagine many painters would have easily recognized, because the Mustard Seed Manual was widely circulated and very popular in Japan at that time. However, it's possible that the prestige of this text may have made this more of like an intentional nod, like maybe he's intentionally saying, hey, look, you know where these come from? You recognize them? Are you cool like me? Have you also read the Mustard Seed Manual of Painting? And I want to finish by taking a quick look at this masterful work called Landscapes of the Four Seasons. This one also dates to 1848. So I'm going to read a little section here from the museum website. These sensitively rendered ink paintings transcend conventional literati images of Chinese-style seasonal landscapes to create an expression of a more individual, moody statement of the artist in nature. One may read the lone figure in each scroll as a representation of the artist himself, presented in the mode of a Chinese sage. The artist did actually play the traverse flute, the instrument of the boatman in the autumn scene. All four of the scrolls in this set are integrated not only by connecting seasonal moods, but also by a unifying elevated point of view. I love how you can just get lost in these landscapes, travel through the mountains, explore the little woodlands that pop up along the way. I believe what we're looking at right now is the winter scene, and there does seem to be a sense of melancholy in the figure that is looking out on the landscape from his window. But it's a kind of melancholy that is mixed with a deep sense of peace that comes from a reflective mood. And what is the meaning of this little hermitage that we see so often in these East Asian landscapes? I see a lot of cynical takes on the idealization of nature in art, but I think that the painting traditions of China, Korea, and Japan show that this desire to be at home within nature is much deeper than some sort of superficial fantasy. Something about the way the mountains recede into the mist, just sort of trail off here, it feels inaccessible. So the little hamlet that we see down below gives us a sense of a threshold where we belong and where we sort of open up to this greater, vaster space that we maybe can't inhabit fully, but we can stand at the edge of and wonder in awe. There's something really lovely about the play of water through the mountains in these traditional landscapes, and it's obvious why the name of this particular genre in Chinese was shan shui, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing correctly, but which means mountain water. The way the water falls in little streams appear and disappear, are hidden, then revealed, are disguised by their own mist at the base. There's something mysterious about it, something that feels pregnant with meaning. There's some sort of hidden poetry here that the artist-poet, of course, remember the literati painters are artists and poets. They're something beyond just what we think of as a painter. Something they're trying to hint at. Here at the bottom of this composition, we see these two figures who seem to be laughing or engaged in some sort of conversation. And again, they feel like some sort of sages, Chinese sages, as was suggested by the museum website. And the little figure that's making his way through the woods maybe is coming to join them or learn from them. Maybe these two jovial beings know the secrets of the mountains and rivers, and they're going to tell this aspiring poet who's coming to join them. Well, that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed learning about Yamamoto Baiitsu and some of the context, the cultural context, how he fits into this period of Japanese art, the Edo period, that is dominated more by the ukiyo-e style and genres, but that, still saw plenty of these more traditional types of works being made alongside the others. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe. I will be putting out a lot more content like this and some of the larger videos for neglected by art history. So if you like those, there will be more of those coming out too. And I guess ciao for now.